Greetings. Welcome to the video series Miss Ann Thrope Explains. I'm Annie Thrope, and in this video, I will explain about language registers. I want to remind you that anytime I ask you to think about something, what I really want you to do is to jot down some ideas or questions that come to mind about the topic I've asked you to think about. In this class, thinking is always done on paper or a page in a word processing program. You will need these notes when you return to class. You will find a graphic organizer on page 3 of your binder, just for language registers. In an earlier video, I explained exactly what academic writing entails. You will remember from the definition I gave you that one must use a formal register in academic writing. Some of you probably already understand what this means, but in my over 40 years of instructing students, I've always had a few who needed a fuller explanation. It has also been my experience that when students understand the language registers, they have fewer problems tackling the more challenging academic reading they encounter in their college classes. How we use language depends on a number of things, a few of which are who our audience is, the nature of the information we're delivering, and the situation in which we find ourselves. We might be very chatty when we're with our friends or our family, but find ourselves unable to speak more than a few words when we're in a classroom with a demanding teacher and very smart classmates. We might find ourselves in situations where we're afraid to say anything because we aren't quite sure what might be appropriate and what might not be appropriate. A good understanding of language registers gives us a roadmap for how to use language, regardless of the situation in which we find ourselves. The whole idea of language registers comes from a man named Martin Jooss, an American professor of German who was also a linguist. The basic information that follows in this video comes from his book, The 5 Clocks. I want to warn you, attribution of the origin of language registers to anyone but Martin Jooss indicates a deep lack of understanding of language registers. A person who makes a false attribution has failed to do his research and is simply parroting something he cannot fully understand. Remember, all information regarding language registers comes from Martin Jooss, MartinJoos, and his book, The 5 Clocks. Now, what comes to mind when you hear the word register? For many of us, the first image that pops in our heads when we hear that word is the cash register in a store. But that's not the only meaning of the word. And that's not the definition Jooss was using in his exploration of language registers. The registers Jooss had in mind were musical registers, meaning the quality of the sound or range of sounds of a musical instrument. So Jooss, when he refers to register, asks us to think about the quality of our language, the quality of the words we use, and the quality of the syntax we employ in different situations. In his book, Jooss asserts that we have 5 different registers in English. You can see from the graphic organizer on page 3 of your binder materials that they are frozen, formal, consultative, casual, and intimate. I will explain each register, moving from frozen to intimate, and then I will explain rules that govern how we move from one register to another. Finally, I will explain some principles of learning that we can extrapolate from Martin Juice's work. Frozen register is the most public of all the registers. It's the most public because it is used almost exclusively in group settings. Frozen register is used for cultural rituals that reinforce cultural identity. The use of frozen language identifies you through your participation as a member of that cultural or civic or religious group. We use frozen register ritualistically. It is shared speech, meaning it is not a conversation. When we engage in frozen register, we are not conveying information. We are engaging in a ritual. So in the column labeled relationship between speaker and audience, we must write that frozen register is spoken together by a group. I repeat, frozen register is not a conversation. So we leave the column labeled how much background information must the speaker supply blank, because there is no separate speaker who delivers information to an audience. Frozen register language is language that does not change. It is frozen. It's passed down from one generation to the next, unchanged. This means that our contemporary understanding of standard English does not apply to it. So the expectations of grammar and usage are however we have received this language. One more meaning of frozen is that users do not change the words. If one were to change the words, it might be to mock the group who participates, or it might be out of ignorance. Allow me to repeat the key markers of frozen register. Handed down from one generation to the next, it is language used in group rituals or ceremonies that reinforces the group identity. Here are some examples of frozen register. The Pledge of Allegiance is an example of frozen register. The pledge is spoken by the group together, and participating in the pledge identifies you as a citizen of the United States. Nursing students recite the Florence Nightingale Pledge. They do it as a group at their graduation, and the language identifies them as proudly entering into the nursing profession. Some Christian religious services use the Lord's Prayer as frozen register, but it is important to remember that the Lord's Prayer is frozen only when it is used as part of the religious service. If a Christian were to pray the Lord's Prayer on her own in private, it would no longer be frozen, because in that instance, it isn't part of a group ritual or a ceremony. If you suspect that some language might be frozen register, ask yourself, is this language spoken together by a group to reinforce the group's identity? If the answer is yes, then you have in all probability identified frozen register language. But be prepared to explain how and why you came to that conclusion. If you make the mistake of using Google or Bing to determine whether or not certain language use is frozen, you will come up against a number of people who have advertised their ignorance about language registers in general and frozen register in particular by asserting something like the Bible is frozen register or Shakespeare is frozen register. The Bible, having been translated into as many languages as exist on Earth, and Klingon, which is putatively not an Earth language, cannot possibly be frozen register. And the beauty of Shakespeare's language does not make it frozen register. Please use your own good sense and the definition I've given you when you come across language that you think might be frozen. The purpose of frozen register is to establish and acknowledge cultural or civic group identity through language that is a key part of a ritual, a formal ceremony. We won't be using much frozen register in this class. We will, however, rely heavily on formal register. Formal register is the best register for conveying abstract information and for persuading an audience with intellectual appeals. The diction and the syntax of formal register are perfect for stepping back from a situation, allowing one to think and deliberate before taking action. The diction and syntax of formal register are also perfect for engaging in analysis. Formal register is not a conversation. It is a one-way delivery of information. The speaker is an expert, and the audience is receptive to the speaker's message. Because formal register is not a conversation, the speaker must supply any background information the audience might need to understand the speaker. And to clarify that point, we need to digress slightly here. This point about the speaker supplying background information is important in academic writing. It places a burden on anyone engaging in academic writing. The speaker or writer must understand some basic facts about the audience, such as how much does the audience already know about the subject of the essay or the article. To help you think about what the audience may or may not know about a subject, I will give you two examples. In the first example, let's imagine I'm a heart surgeon, and I've developed a technique for repairing the aortic valve. This technique is new and unlike anything the world of medicine has ever seen. Now imagine that you too are a heart surgeon and you're attending my presentation on how to repair the aortic valve according to Dr. Miss Anthrope. Do I need to explain how the heart muscle is unlike any other muscle in the human body? Do I need to explain how to detect aortic anomalies? No. As heart surgeons, you already know that, so I would be wasting your time, maybe even insulting you, if I spent time on those topics. So the heart surgeon audience doesn't need that background information. But let's examine a different scenario. Let's imagine I'm still a heart surgeon. I've still developed this technique for repairing the aortic valve. But now you are my patient and I need to explain the surgery to you. Do I need to explain about heart muscle? Yes, you probably don't know that much about how heart muscle is different from other muscles of the human body. Do I need to explain how I detected your aortic anomaly? Oh, most probably because you don't spend much time around heart surgeons. The heart surgery patient in this situation needs all that background information. What this means for you as a college student who will have to engage in academic writing regularly is that you will need to think carefully about your audience and determine just how much and what kind of background information your audience needs for a full understanding of your argument. Okay, let's get back to formal register. As for grammar and usage, formal register requires complete sentences. One does not use contractions or slang in formal register. We expect formal register to conform to standard English. Standard English is, as is formal register, best for conveying intellectual concepts. In fact, almost all academic knowledge is encoded in standard English and formal register. If you want to pursue higher learning in almost any field, economics, physics, political science, history, engineering, you must be able to read and write in formal register. Some examples of written formal register are peer-reviewed journals, most textbooks, business letters, reference books. Some examples of oral formal register are speeches, some TED Talks, some high school or college lectures. I would also include a large number of sermons in this category. Formal register has a twofold purpose: to persuade and to inform. In all instances of formal register, the writer or the speaker must work to do both, persuade and inform. I will explain more about persuasion as an element of academic writing you as a college student must master in a later video. But I will reiterate that we will, in this course, be relying heavily on formal register, and that as a college student, you will benefit by mastering formal register. And that brings us to the third register Juice outlines in his book, consultative register. Consultative register is the same as formal register in all things except that it is a two-way conversation. In formal register, the speaker or writer delivers information in a persuasive fashion to a receptive audience. It is a one-way delivery of information. Consultative is when two or more speakers or writers engage in a conversation but maintain standard English while each attempts to persuade and to inform. This means that those involved in consultative register are both the listener and the speaker. Consultative can be tricky if you're not used to maintaining standard English in a conversation, but I would encourage you to work at it because the more you practice, the more practice you get with consultative register, the easier it will be to master formal register. So on our note-taking sheet, the only issue we need to consider separately from formal register is the issue of background information. What can you do in a conversation that you cannot do when someone is lecturing to a class of 300? Yes, you can answer questions. You can ask questions. So if you were in conversation with a heart surgeon and the heart surgeon made a remark about heart muscle that you didn't quite understand, you could, when it came your time to speak, ask the heart surgeon just what she meant when she made that remark. In consultative register, We don't concern ourselves as much about background information because an interested audience will, when the moment is right, ask for clarification. Consultative register allows us to treat one another with dignity and respect. We speak to each other as equals, even though between us might be an age difference, an educational difference, priestly vestments, or a judge's gavel. Consultative register is the safest place to begin a conversation. It signals to another person that not only do we respect that other person, but that we expect to be treated with respect in return. Consultative register also allows you to step back from your emotions and to use reason to consider a situation or a concept or an issue from an intellectual vantage point. Indeed, consultative register allows us to establish a reasoned debate over issues, ideas, and concepts that form the foundation of thinking in different disciplines. In other words, consultative register prepares us to learn at a deep level. My own experience of more than 40 years of teaching suggests that consultative register is the best register for the classroom because the word choice and sentence structure necessary for consultative register are the same diction and syntax that best convey academic information. Over 94% of all academic information is available only through formal register. In fact, over 94% of all legal, economic, scientific, and technical information is available only through formal register. Frozen, formal, and consultative registers are all public registers. You are safe in engaging in consultative or formal register in any public situation. And frozen register is used only in groups, most often in public venues. The next two registers, however, are not public language. They work best in private settings. Casual register is the language that we default to when we are with family or friends. It is the register we use the most. It's the register of the family, the playground, the sports team, the neighborhood. It's the register where we are the most comfortable. Ultimately, casual register does not transfer well or transfers uncomfortably into an academic text. Casual register it requires an emotional bond because the word choice and sentence structure of casual register serve to carry emotion. In fact, they rely on emotion. The words and sentences of casual register are often simpler and shorter than those of formal or consultative register. Let's think for a moment of the workplace. Some workplaces encourage close friendships and expect casual register among the workers. While this might seem a more comfortable atmosphere, in reality, it is also an atmosphere that can foster unexpected mood changes and unpredictable emotional undertones. A more formal workplace might require some adjustment because some people need the emotional bond and comfort of casual register to feel supported. Initially, formal and consultative register might be stressful to someone who hasn't been required to engage in them. This should serve as a caution for you. If your previous schooling has not required you to master consultative or formal register, you might face a learning curve. But don't worry, this course will help you practice both consultative and formal register, and your instructor understands the importance of casual register to your life. So let's think a bit about how we talk to our friends and family. When you're with your brothers or your sister or with good friends, how would you characterize the relation between what we've been calling speaker and audience? There's an emotional connection between the speaker and the audience, isn't there? And there are many shared experiences between the speaker and the audience, aren't there? I would even suggest that there are strong bonds of loyalty, of kinship, of like-mindedness, aren't there? The 2 or 3 or 5 of you can relax. You can be yourself. You can express yourself however you like, can't you? Now let's think about how much background information you have to supply. I'll give you 3 scenarios. 1, you're talking to your best friend since 5th grade. 2, you're talking to someone at work you like and respect, but whom you don't know well. 3, you're talking to a police officer. Now, think about something you've done recently. If you were to relay this thing you've done recently, how much background information do you have to supply to your best friend? How much background information do you have to supply to your workmate? How much to the police officer? I will suggest that you didn't have to give your friend much background information. And you had to give a little more background information to your workmate. But when it came to the police officer, you had to give detailed background information. When you explain something to your friend, you're probably in casual register. And when you explain something personal to a workmate, you're also probably in casual register. But each one gets a different amount of background information because each one has a different relation to you. You have much more history with your best friend than with your workmate, far more shared experiences, but I will still suggest you're both using casual register. But if you find yourself talking to a police officer, you are safest using consultative register. Because the police officer, unless he's a family member or a neighbor, needs a full understanding of any situation. Casual register doesn't lend itself to providing great amounts of background information. We are used to speaking in shorthand when we use casual register. A police officer, in fact, most authority figures, won't know your personal shorthand. Let me explain what I mean by shorthand when we think about casual register. In casual register, we find slang, lots of slang. We find short and often incomplete sentences. Think about talking with someone who knows you well. You don't need to finish your sentences because your friend knows you well enough to finish the sentence for herself. In fact, you might have a small group of friends with whom you spend a great deal of time. I will suggest that you and your friends have certain code words, certain nicknames for things and people that no one outside your group uses. I would even go so far as to say that your family also has certain code words, nicknames for things, places, people, actions. This is casual register. Now let's think about standard English and rules of grammar and usage. Are they important when you're with your friends? They're probably not even important when you're with your family. This is casual register. But let's go back to your conversation with the police officer. Because casual register is primarily a social language, it can easily be misunderstood by someone who doesn't know you well. While it's perfect for private conversations, it does not help our cause when we are talking with authority figures. Now, let's think of some examples of oral casual register. We've already covered conversations among and between family and friends. But how about the playground when you were little? How about your interactions on sport teams? How are you with your roommate? These are all great examples of casual register. When I first started teaching my students about language registers, almost 30 years ago, I could say with authority that we had very few examples of written casual register. But technological advancements in communication have changed that. Where can we read examples of casual register? Tweets, text messages, emails between families and friends, social media. There are blogs and websites that rely wholly on casual register. But given all I've explained about casual register, you can see that its purpose is for emotional and social bonding. Finally, I will provide a cursory explanation of intimate register. Intimate register, often nonverbal, is inappropriate in an academic or work situation. The language of long-abiding emotional and often spiritual intimacy, it is a deeply private language. I have a colleague who explains it thus. Intimate register is for those who share a womb or a room. And by sharing a room, he means sharing a room for decades, because it takes time to develop the level of intimacy necessary to engage in intimate register. Now, let's step back and think for a moment about how the way we use language might define us. The first language we, as infants, are exposed to is intimate. Think of a mom or a dad with a brand new baby. The care and love they show is the language of intimate register. Then think about when the baby becomes a toddler, playing with siblings or other toddlers in preschool or daycare. The child now learns casual register. And the child continues to use casual register, even inside the family from here on. But at what point does the child meet consultative or formal register? And how much of the child's day is spent mastering either consultative or formal register? As you consider this, I think you might see why some people resist practicing or learning consultative or formal register. A point Jooss believed was vital to our understanding of language registers is how to move from one register to the next. Jooss believed that most situations require us to move through a register instead of jumping willy-nilly from one register to the next. For example, imagine you are with a group of close friends, 4 or 5 of your favorite people. You're sitting around, joking, talking, generally enjoying each other's company in casual register. Now imagine if one of you suddenly began lecturing the others in formal register about a topic of social or cultural concern. How would you respond to this jump from casual to formal? It would seem a little jarring, wouldn't it? It might take you by surprise. In fact, you might laugh at your friend, or you might think your friend had temporarily taken leave of his senses. But what if, instead of jumping into a formal register lecture, your friend had introduced the topic conversationally and slowly moved into consultative register, encouraging you with his sincerity to respond in consultative register? He could then launch into a short lecture without seeming too odd given the circumstances. This is what Juice considers moving through a register. Here's another example. Imagine you have a professor, an older woman, who lectures in formal register for 30 to 40 minutes, but then, without warning and during class, starts talking specifically to you in casual register. Wouldn't it seem oddly out of place? Wouldn't you wonder what just had happened? Would you be comfortable in this situation responding in casual register? But what if she had posed a few questions in consultative register, eliciting responses from you in the same register? Then, when she dropped into casual, it wouldn't be so odd. Well, maybe it would be odd if she were trying too hard to be cool. This point Juice asks us to consider is important for your progress as a reader and a writer of academic texts. Think for a moment about your own use of the different registers in your life. Which register is most comfortable for you? In which register do you spend most of your time? For most people, it's casual. Yet in college, you're expected to master formal register, both the reading and the writing of formal register. If you spend most of your time in casual register, and you haven't spent much time mastering the reading of formal register language at or above your grade level, college reading and college writing will be a formidable challenge. So I advise you to take Juice's advice and practice consultative register with everyone you can: your instructors and professors, your counselors, the cashier at the grocery store. The more you practice consultative register, the more easily you will master formal register. Thank you for viewing this video in the Miss Ann Thrope Explains series.